mourning, not, first thing when the sun comes up, not MORNING, but MOURING, mourning. And mourning is really the cultural response to grief and bereavement. This includes rituals and sort of overt processes for coping. So different cultures have different ways of moving through the grief process. And those rituals, those ways of moving through make up mourning. So for example, in my part of the country, and this is different parts of the country and obviously different from different parts of the world, and in my culture, what we did was there was the death, and then usually about 3 days later would be a viewing at a funeral home or maybe in a church, and people would come for the viewing, and then there would be a funeral service, usually the next day, sometimes later the same day of the viewing. So there'd be a service, a funeral service, and that service might have some music, and it would have a eulogy honoring the person's life, and it might have a sermon, and then there would be a final pass by the casket, and the casket would be closed, and then there would be a graveside service, and then after the graveside service would be this meal that the bereavement committee is hosting. And so there's just sort of this way of going about it, so that if someone chose not to engage in one of those steps, I'm not saying it was wrong or bad or whatever, but it was kind of noticeable because it wasn't following the normal process for the culture. That's mourning. That's how we mourn. Here's why I think it's important to understand these concepts as it relates to betrayal trauma, because betrayal trauma is a very particular type of bereavement. You haven't necessarily lost a person. No one's necessarily died, and you're not even necessarily being deprived of a person. No one's taken from you. What has been lost is something different, and actually something multidimensional. The grief that then follows this unusual, or it's not actually unusual, it's more undefined within the culture, less acknowledged within the culture. The process of grief that follows doesn't have a cultural script. It doesn't have a set way of being mourned.